Okay, so the White House is not going to say, yes, he will sign the infrastructure bill if it comes alone to his desk.
The president expects to sign each piece of legislation into law.
Even those Republicans who readily jumped on board to try to work with the Biden White House on an infrastructure deal are calling foul.
And there won't be a single Republican that votes for the kind of massive increase that the president's fighting for. And there was no discussion during our negotiations whatsoever of tying those things together.
But Psaki also attempting to put Republicans in the hot seat with a little projection, suggesting that because Republicans would not sign on to the full Biden agenda, that they are responsible for defunding police.
The president did mention that the American Rescue Plan, the state and local funding, something that was supported by the president, a lot of Democrats who supported and voted for the bill, could help ensure local cops were kept on the beat in communities across the country. As you know, didn't receive a single Republican vote. That funding has been used to keep cops on the beat.
Several lawmakers and aides we talked to on the Hill regarding that statement said they found that laughable. Now, talking about the president's trips to Wisconsin today, he'll highlight specifically bridges and some of the hard infrastructure pushes in this bipartisan deal. He'll make a statement, remarks in an attempt to try to what Jen Psaki call push this deal through from the bully pulpit. But it has more than just this infrastructure deal to do today, and that this is also a start at play in the 2022 midterm elections that the president is looking at as Democrats hope to flip a seat from a Republican to Democrat in that midterm cycle. John?
All right, joining us now to talk more about this, South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace and Colorado Congressman Ken Buck. Great to have you both with us.
Good to be with you.
Good morning.
All right, well, first let's talk about Jen Psaki there. Congresswoman Mace trying to blame Republicans for defunding the police. I mean, I guess you guys deserve a round of applause. Somehow the Republican Party has infiltrated the Oakland City Council, the Minneapolis City Council, the Atlanta City Council. All this time, I guess you guys had GOP operatives in there and nobody knew it.
I know, it's crazy. There's brazen and shameless, and then there's Jen Psaki accusing Republicans of wanting to defund the police. You know, we want to defend the police, not defund them. And they are backtracking with this infrastructure package, trying to throw everything in it to make us look bad. But I got to tell you, Thursday, Friday, and Monday, we received 3 different messages in 3 different days regarding the supposedly bipartisan infrastructure package. And so I don't know what they're doing. I don't even know if they know what they're doing. But Republicans aren't going to get behind a bill that's tied to budget reconciliation, more spending, never-ending spending, and the highest tax hike ever seen in American history. We just can't get behind that deal.
Yeah. Well, Congressman Buck, I want to take a closer look at that Jen Psaki soundbite again. We heard one from Emerald here. Here's another spin on it.
The president did mention that the American Rescue Plan, the state and local funding, something that was supported by the president, a lot of Democrats who supported and voted for the bill, could help ensure local cops were kept on the beat in communities across the country. As you know, didn't receive a single Republican vote. That funding has been used to keep cops on the beat.
Now, I would be willing to bet if Democrats were willing to offer that up as a skinny bill, you guys would support that part of it, but it's not really in there, is it? That's disingenuous of her to say that.
Well, it absolutely is. And the problem with that bill was that it was a multi-trillion-dollar bill, and it had a small portion for police. And now they're saying that Republicans don't support police because we didn't support the multi-trillion bill. It's absolute nonsense. And the problem that Democrats have is that they are being labeled because of the activities in various city councils, as well as members of Congress who have called for defunding the police. They are rightly being labeled as the party who wants to defund police. If they want to offer a bill, a small bill, to help local police departments, absolutely, they'll get Republican support on that. I personally don't know that Republicans should be supporting at the national level what happens in state and local jurisdictions, but we certainly will be out in our own districts supporting the police and making sure that they have appropriate funding.
Yeah, no, it's an important distinction. I mean, we've seen, communities that do need additional resources when it comes to law enforcement, but Republicans certainly don't support a federal law enforcement approach, at least not from the Biden administration, other than the Department of Justice, and we know what's going on there. I want to talk to you, Congresswoman Mace, about Nancy Pelosi and her desire to create this 13-member panel to investigate January 6th. We heard Congresswoman Maxine Waters from over the weekend saying that Democrats tried to work with Republicans to find some common ground on where this investigation would go, but she said that wasn't possible. What is that common ground she is talking about, or is she just lying?
Well, there's very little common ground right now in D.C. on Capitol Hill. And in fact, we've spent more federal resources and money investigating January 6th than we did for 9/11. There are 4 federal agencies already on board doing their own investigations, criminal investigations. In fact, the FBI, Secret Service, Homeland Security, and the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. And then on top of that, we have 10 committees, both in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives, who are also each doing their own investigations with broad subpoena power and investigative authority to do that. And so if that's not good enough, when all of those investigations are done, and already 450 people have been charged with a crime, there have been over 500 federal charges for crimes committed on January 6th. If at the end of the day, when all of this is said and done and they don't get the answers they want, then I think at that point you could have that conversation. But at this juncture, all of the agencies and all the committees that are already investigating, they're doing a very good job. And if you want to talk about bipartisan, I would hope that of all places, the Department of Justice would be nonpartisan in those investigations. So it's kind of confusing. We're doing all this, we're focused on all of this, and yet they need to have one more commission.
Do you really think that they're doing a good job on the investigation?
In terms of the charges, there have already been over 450 people charged. That's significant. We are having committee hearings. In fact, we've had multiple hearings in the Oversight Committee that I sit on for January 6th. So the work is being done. And I think everyone's doing their part for it. To have another commission with 13 people led and guided and put together by Nancy Pelosi, I think that it's too much. It's overkill for all the other resources we're devoting to this effort today.
And I ask that question because we've almost been conditioned as Americans to, watching episodes of CSI, like there's going to be, cut and dried information, everything's going to be clean and packaged, and we're going to get this, thing that's going to be obvious to everyone actually what happened. And we're learning that that's not quite the case here. This is going to take some time to investigate. What do you think, Congressman Buck? Do you think the investigation, are you happy with what you're seeing from the Department of Justice and the FBI so far when it comes to their investigation into this?
Well, I have to tell you, I think that there is a much broader investigation that needs to happen. We currently know that Antifa was funded on a national basis. We don't see any indictments. We don't see any charges of what happened in the summer of 2020. We don't see the Department of Justice moving in a coordinated fashion with state and local authorities to investigate those issues. If you want to talk about political crime and you want to talk about giving Americans some assurance that crime in their communities is going to go down, it's not an isolated incident on January 6th. It is the pattern of conduct that we've seen over time throughout this country, really, not just in Portland, but throughout the country from these radical socialists that are really bent on destroying property and killing humans.
Yeah, you used to hear the FBI director for Christopher Wray talk about that as part of this discussion about what he considers DVEs, which is domestic violent extremists, his terminology. But now, he has stripped away all that kind of talk of Antifa and these other leftist organizations from that broader conversation. So that hasn't happened. Let's also talk, too, about these big tech bills. I'm going to go first to Congressman Buck on this, and then we'll go back to Congresswoman Mace, because, Congressman Buck, you do support these House Judiciary bills that are coming out of the committee there. But I wanted to ask you about what happened yesterday. The New York Times headline saying that the antitrust case against Facebook crumbles. A federal court said that the FTC did not prove Facebook maintains a monopoly. What's your reaction to that?
Well, what the judge said was that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, didn't show the market that Facebook was supposedly in control of. And the problem with the law is that the law, the Sherman Act was written in the late 1800s. The Clayton Act was written in the early 1900s, and those laws haven't been updated. There was no such thing as social media around, obviously, in the early 1900s. And so the judge said, if we look at the tobacco industry, we know what the market is in the tobacco industry. We don't know what the market is with social media, and the FTC hasn't met their burden. What the judge did was give the FTC 30 days to further define that issue. But it's exactly why we need to update the laws to meet our new economy. And these laws, the 6 bills that passed on a bipartisan basis out of the U.S. House Judiciary Committee, are exactly the first step, the starting point and getting us to where we need to go in holding big tech accountable, not just with their monopoly and protecting consumers, but also on the speech side, making sure that the antitrust amnesty that these big tech giants have had for years doesn't apply to the censorship, and we are able to deal with the censorship in the marketplace.
Congresswoman Mace, I've talked to Congressman Jim Jordan about this too. He does not support the bill like Congressman Buck does. So I'm going to ask you how you feel about this. Do you think it is a first step, or is it really a starting point?
I do believe it's a starting point. What we do know is that we need to modernize our laws for big tech and social media. And we do know that big tech and social media is stacked against conservatives. In my own campaign for Congress in November, a week before the election, my ads on Facebook were polled for 15 hours in a very critical time in a swing district in a heated race, one of the top races last year where Republicans flipped a Democrat seat. We also see conservatives all the time being banned or temporarily banned from social media, whether that's Twitter or Facebook. They've banned former President Trump for the next few years, but then leave communist China on Twitter as they're advocating for genocide against Muslims in their own country. The standards are different. So if you're going to have a standard for free speech on those platforms, those private companies and those businesses, it needs to be the same standard regardless of your political affiliation. It needs to be an even and equal playing field. Yeah. I'm also hearing rumblings about Facebook investing in ads over hundreds of millions of dollars in certain areas around the country to turn out the vote. Those are things that I have questions about and I want answers for to understand what's really going on and recognize and know that there is an uneven playing field and hold these companies accountable.
Yeah, and as Congressman Jordan's message was that he wants more in those bills to address those issues specifically. A great conversation. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We got to get to a commercial break. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, thanks so much. Congressman Ken Buck, thank you for your time as well. We appreciate it, guys.